The restaurant buzzed with laughter and champagne bubbles rising in crystal glasses. My 60th birthday dinner. 60 candles on a cake I'd picked out myself because no one else offered. I sat at the head of the table, smiling at faces I'd known for decades, trying to ignore the hollow feeling spreading through my chest. Then Sienna leaned toward my son Caleb and whispered something I couldn't hear. He smiled, that confident smile I used to love, and stood up. His chair scraped against the hardwood floor. Everyone turned to look. He raised his glass, and for a moment, I thought he was going to toast me. My heart swelled with hope. "Mom," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the private dining room, "Sienna and I have been talking. We're going to move into your house soon. You don't really need it anymore, right?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few forced laughs. Sienna smirked behind her wine glass, watching me. My heart didn't just break. It shattered into pieces so small I wondered if I'd ever find them all again. I left the table without saying goodbye. Nobody stopped me. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The streetlights blurred through tears I refused to let fall until I was safely inside my house. My house. The one my husband and I bought 32 years ago. The one where I raised Caleb alone after cancer took his father. The one filled with memories of birthday mornings and scraped knees and bedtime stories. I sat in the dark living room, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. My name is Marianne Holt, and my son used to be my whole world. I remembered him at 5 years old, running into my arms after his first day of kindergarten, telling me I was the best mom in the whole universe. I remembered him at 16, crying on my shoulder when his first girlfriend broke his heart. When had that boy disappeared? When had he become this stranger who announced he'd take my home like it was nothing? Caleb wasn't always like this. Before Sienna, he called me every Sunday. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. He'd stop by unannounced just to steal leftovers from my fridge and tell me about his week. After his father died when he was 12, we became a team. Me and him against the world. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to keep us afloat. I waitressed at night after spending all day as a receptionist. I sold my jewelry, my car, anything that could be converted to cash for his college fund. I skipped meals so he could have new shoes for basketball tryouts. I wore the same coat for 8 winters because his future mattered more than my comfort. He got into a good university on a partial scholarship. I covered the rest by taking out loans I'm still paying off. He graduated with honors, got a good job, met Sienna at a company mixer 3 years ago. That's when everything changed. That's when I started losing him. I met Sienna for the first time at a Sunday brunch Caleb organized. She walked in wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a handbag that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "So you're Marianne," she said, looking me up and down like she was inspecting produce at the grocery store. "Caleb's told me so much about you." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. During brunch, she corrected my grammar twice. When I mentioned I'd been reading a novel, she said, "Oh, you have time to read? That must be nice." Her tone suggested it wasn't nice at all, that it was lazy. When I talked about my garden, she interrupted to tell everyone about her mother's professionally landscaped yard. Caleb laughed at her jokes, even the ones that landed like small cuts across my skin. When I mentioned feeling a bit dismissed, he said, "Mom, you're being sensitive. Sienna's just confident. You'll love her once you get to know her." I wanted to believe him. I tried so hard to believe him. The changes started slowly, like water wearing away stone. Caleb's Sunday calls became sporadic. Then monthly. Then they stopped altogether. I'd call him and get voicemail. He'd text back hours later with short replies. "Busy. Talk later. At work." One afternoon, I called and he answered on speakerphone. I heard Sienna's voice in the background before he could mute it. "She's too attached, Caleb. You need to pull away. It's not healthy how much she depends on you emotionally." My son's response, "You're right. I'll set better boundaries." Boundaries. That became his favorite word. "Mom, I need boundaries." "Mom, we can't come over this weekend." Boundaries. "Mom, Sienna thinks we need space." It's about healthy boundaries. I wanted to scream that boundaries weren't walls, that loving your mother wasn't unhealthy, that I'd given him everything and now he was rationing out crumbs of his time like I should be grateful. But I stayed quiet. I always stayed quiet. Maybe that was my first mistake. Thanksgiving came and went without an invitation. I spent it alone with a store-bought turkey dinner and reruns of old movies. Christmas was the same. Easter. My birthday the year before. I'd scroll through social media and see photos Sienna posted. Family gathering, she'd caption them, showing Caleb laughing with her parents, her siblings, their children. Pictures of a full table, everyone smiling. I wasn't in a single photo. I wasn't invited to a single gathering. When I mentioned it to Caleb, he said, "Mom, you know how Sienna's family is. They're really close-knit. It would be weird to bring outside people." Outside people. I was an outside person to my own son. I started avoiding social media altogether. Every post felt like a knife twisting deeper. I told myself he was busy, that newly married couples needed time to build their own traditions. I made excuses for him because the alternative, accepting that I'd lost him, was too painful to bear. My house felt bigger somehow. Emptier. The silence had weight. Sienna started visiting my house without Caleb. The first time, she showed up unannounced with coffee and that practiced smile. "Just wanted to check in on you," she said, walking through my living room like she owned it. She touched the curtains, examined the furniture, looked out the bay window at my garden. "This is a lot of space for one person," she said casually. "Have you thought about what you'll do with it when you're older?" I told her I planned to stay here. This was my home. "Oh, of course," she replied, but her eyes said something different. "I just mean, eventually you might want something smaller. Easier to maintain. This house would be perfect for a growing family. Lots of bedrooms. Good school district." She wasn't subtle. Over the next few months, every conversation somehow circled back to my house. Its value. Its size. How they needed more space. How I was rattling around in all these empty rooms. The subtext was clear. She wanted my house. And she'd convinced Caleb he deserved it. That birthday dinner was planned down to the last detail. I realize that now, looking back. The restaurant Sienna chose. The guest list she controlled. The timing of Caleb's announcement, right after the appetizers when everyone was comfortable and drinking. Sienna wore red that night, like she was celebrating a victory. When Caleb stood up and said those words, "We're going to move into your house soon. You don't really need it anymore," I watched her face. She wasn't surprised. She was satisfied. This was her plan, executed perfectly in front of witnesses so I'd be too embarrassed to object. Some guests laughed uncomfortably. Others stared at their plates. My best friend, Donna, reached for my hand under the table, but I pulled away. I stood up calmly, set my napkin down beside my untouched dessert, and walked out. Nobody followed me. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and finally let myself cry. Not sad tears. Angry tears. The kind that burn when they fall. That night, something inside me changed. Something hardened. I was done being small. Done being convenient. Done waiting for love that clearly wasn't coming back. I spent the weekend in my house, walking from room to room, looking at everything with new eyes. The kitchen where I'd taught Caleb to bake cookies. The living room where we'd built blanket forts during thunderstorms. His old bedroom, still decorated with his high school basketball trophies because I couldn't bear to pack them away. Every corner held a memory of the boy who used to love me, who used to think I hung the moon. That boy was gone. In his place was a man I barely recognized, a man who'd humiliate his mother in public because his wife whispered poison in his ear. I made a decision that Sunday night, sitting on my back porch as the sun set behind the neighbor's oak tree. No one would ever make me feel small in my own life again. Not Caleb. Not Sienna. Not anyone. If they wanted to treat me like I was already dead, like my only value was what I could leave behind, then I'd show them exactly what happens when you discard someone before they're finished living. Monday morning, I called my neighbor's daughter, who was a lawyer. We met at her office that afternoon. The building smelled like coffee and expensive carpet. She sat across from me, professional but kind, and asked how she could help. I want to sell my house, I said. I want to know my options. She explained everything patiently. The house was entirely in my name. My husband and I had owned it jointly, but after he passed, it transferred to me. I'd paid off the mortgage last year using my retirement savings. It was mine, legally and completely. I could sell it to anyone, anytime, for any reason. Does anyone else have a claim to this property? She asked. No, I told her. My son thinks he does, but he doesn't. She looked at me carefully. Are you sure about this? Selling a family home is a big decision. I met her eyes. I'm absolutely sure. She slid paperwork across the desk. Then let's begin. I signed my name on the first document, and my hand didn't shake once. It felt like freedom. The real estate agent was a woman named Patricia, recommended by the lawyer. She had kind eyes and didn't ask uncomfortable questions. We met at my house on a Tuesday. She walked through every room, taking notes, snapping photos. This is a beautiful home, she said sincerely. Well maintained, great neighborhood, good bones. It'll sell quickly. I asked her to list it privately at first, no signs in the yard, no public announcements. I didn't want Caleb or Sienna to know. Not yet. I understand, Patricia said, and I believed she did. She'd probably seen family drama play out over real estate before. Within a week, she had interested buyers. Within 2 weeks, we had 3 competing offers. There's one offer that's $15,000 over asking price, Patricia told me over the phone. Cash sale, quick closing. They're a young family, expecting their second child. They love the house. I thought about that young family, imagined children running through these halls again, filling the rooms with laughter. Accept their offer, I said. Let's move forward. Strangers walked through my home during the final showing. A young couple, maybe early 30s, with a little girl who couldn't have been more than 4. She ran straight to Caleb's old bedroom and gasped. Mommy, can this be my room? Please. Her mother laughed, and the sound echoed through the empty hallway. I stood in the doorway watching them, feeling grief and liberation twisted together like vines. This house held my entire adult life. My marriage. My motherhood. My joy and my pain. And soon it would belong to someone else, people who'd make their own memories here, who'd paint over my carefully chosen colors and rearrange the furniture I'd selected piece by piece. Part of me wanted to scream, to stop this, to call everything off. But the stronger part, the part that remembered Caleb's words at that restaurant, that part whispered, they don't deserve this. They don't deserve you. The offer came through that evening, official and binding. I signed it without hesitation. There was no going back now. And I didn't want to go back. I didn't know this until later, but while I was selling my house, Caleb and Sienna were making plans of their own. They stood in their cramped 2-bedroom apartment, the one they'd been renting for 3 years, and discussed renovations for a house they didn't own. The master bedroom is huge, Sienna said, holding paint swatches against the wall. We can finally get that king-sized bed I wanted. And the 3rd bedroom would make a perfect nursery. Caleb nodded, scrolling through furniture websites on his tablet. We should start looking at contractors. Mom probably hasn't updated anything in decades. We'll need to modernize the kitchen, redo the bathrooms. She won't mind, Sienna assured him. It's not like she's using it properly anyway. She'll probably be relieved to downsize to some little apartment. They made spreadsheets of renovation costs. They opened a credit card to finance the furniture they'd need. They told Sienna's parents about their plans, received congratulations, started dreaming about a future built on my loss. They never once asked me. Never confirmed. Never verified. They just assumed. And that assumption was about to cost them everything. The closing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the lawyer's office. I wore my best dress, the navy blue one I'd bought for Caleb's college graduation and had worn to every important occasion since. Patricia met me in the lobby with an encouraging smile. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. The conference room was formal and cold, all glass and chrome. The young couple sat across from me, nervous but excited. We signed document after document, initialing pages, dating signatures. The lawyer explained each section, but I barely heard him. I was watching my life change in real time, watching the last tie to my old existence dissolve into ink on paper. When it was finished, the young mother reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "We'll take good care of it. We'll make it a happy home." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. "I know you will." The house was officially, legally sold. 32 years of my life transferred to strangers in under an hour. I walked out of that office lighter somehow. Freer. Ready for whatever came next. I went back to the house one last time before the new owners moved in. The movers had already taken my furniture to a storage unit. The rooms echoed with emptiness, every sound amplified. I walked slowly through each space, letting myself remember. The kitchen, where Caleb took his first steps, holding onto the counter for balance. The living room, where we'd spent Christmas mornings opening presents while snow fell outside. The backyard, where I'd pushed him on the swing set until my arms ached. His bedroom, where I'd read him stories until he fell asleep. I stood in the master bedroom doorway, the room I'd shared with my husband, where we'd whispered dreams and plans, where I'd cried myself to sleep after he died. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the empty house. "I'm sorry I couldn't keep you. But I can't be a ghost in my own life anymore." I cried then, really cried, letting myself grieve everything I was leaving behind. But when I locked the door for the last time and put the key in the lockbox for the new owners, I stood tall. Caleb wanted me to disappear, to become invisible. Instead, I was choosing to live. Caleb and Sienna showed up at my old house on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the sale closed. I wasn't there. I was already gone. They pulled into the driveway and saw unfamiliar cars parked outside. A minivan with car seats. Toys scattered across the front lawn. Through the window, they could see people moving around inside, children running, completely at home. Sienna got out of the car first, confused. She walked up to the front door and knocked. A woman answered, the young mother I'd sold to. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. "Who are you?" Sienna demanded. "Why are you in this house?" The woman's smile faded. "We live here. We bought this house 3 weeks ago." "Who are you?" Caleb was out of the car now, standing frozen on the walkway. "There must be a mistake," he said, his voice shaking. "This is my mother's house." "Not anymore," the woman said firmly. "Now please leave, or I'll call the police." They drove away in shock. In horror. In dawning realization that everything they'd assumed, everything they'd planned, was gone. My phone rang 30 minutes later. Caleb's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "How could you do this?" he screamed, his voice raw with panic. "That house was supposed to be mine. You promised me that house." I sat in my new apartment, the one I'd rented in a quiet coastal town 2 hours away, and felt surprisingly calm. "I never promised you anything, Caleb. You assumed. There's a difference." "Mom, this is insane. You can't just sell our family home without telling me. I'm your son." And you're the one who announced at my birthday dinner that I didn't matter anymore, that you were taking my house. You didn't ask. You declared. So I made my own declaration. Where am I supposed to live? His voice cracked. Sienna and I have been planning everything around that house. We took out loans for renovations. We bought furniture. Our lease is ending next month. That sounds like poor planning, I said quietly. You should have asked before assuming. I'm your son, he repeated, like that entitled him to everything. Yes, I agreed. You are. And I loved you more than anything. But love doesn't mean I have to disappear for your convenience. I hung up. He called back immediately. I didn't answer. I turned off my phone and sat in the silence, breathing deeply, feeling powerful for the first time in years. The fallout was immediate. Caleb and Sienna discovered their lease was indeed expiring. The landlord wanted to raise rent by 40%, pricing them out. They'd spent thousands on furniture and contractor deposits, money they couldn't get back. Their credit card debt was climbing. They had no backup plan because the backup plan had been my house. Sienna's parents couldn't help. They'd recently downsized themselves and had no extra room. Caleb called his boss, asking about relocation opportunities in cheaper cities. Sienna started looking at apartments they could barely afford in rough neighborhoods. Their carefully constructed life, built on the foundation of my anticipated absence, was crumbling. I learned all this later, through Donna, who heard it from mutual friends. Part of me felt guilty. I'd raised Caleb to be better than this, to be self-sufficient and responsible. But the larger part of me, the part they'd tried to erase, felt nothing but relief. They were adults. They'd made choices. Now they'd live with consequences. Just like I'd had to my entire life. My new apartment was small, just one bedroom, but it overlooked the ocean. I could hear waves from my balcony. I joined a local art group that met Wednesday evenings at the community center. I painted for the first time since Caleb was born, rediscovered a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. My neighbors were kind. The woman next door, Helen, invited me to book club. The couple downstairs shared vegetables from their garden. People learned my name, asked about my day, treated me like I mattered. Like I existed beyond what I could provide. I volunteered at the library on weekends, shelving books and helping with children's reading hour. I took walks on the beach every morning, letting the salt air clean away years of hurt. Slowly, week by week, I remembered what it felt like to be Marianne. Not Caleb's mother. Not the widow. Not the woman who could be discarded. Just Marianne. A person with value, with interests, with a future still ahead of her. I started sleeping through the night again. Started smiling at strangers. Started feeling like I could breathe. 2 months after I moved, I hosted my first dinner party. Helen from next door, the couple from downstairs, 3 women from art group, Patricia the real estate agent who'd become a friend. We ate pasta and drank wine and laughed until our sides hurt. Someone told a story about their daughter's wedding disaster. Someone else shared photos from a recent trip to Portland. Nobody asked me to justify my existence. Nobody made me feel small. When they left that night, each person hugged me at the door and thanked me for inviting them. Same time next month? Helen asked hopefully. Absolutely, I said, and meant it. After they were gone, I cleaned up slowly, washing dishes by hand, putting away leftover food. The apartment smelled like garlic and friendship. I looked around at my small space, my carefully chosen furniture, my paintings hanging on the walls, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. This was my life now. These were my people. And I'd chosen them just like I'd chosen myself. That choice was worth everything I'd left behind. Caleb showed up on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in November. I heard the knock and looked through the peephole, seeing him standing there alone, soaked from the rain, looking smaller somehow. I opened the door slowly. How did you find me? I asked. Donna, he admitted. I begged her. We stood there, me in the doorway, him in the hallway, neither quite ready to bridge the gap between us. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I stepped aside. He walked into my apartment, taking in the small space, the ocean view, the evidence of my new life. He looked tired, older than his 32 years. Why did you do it? He finally asked, not angry anymore, just confused. I sat on my couch, gestured for him to sit. He took the chair across from me. Because I needed to matter to myself, Caleb. You made it very clear I didn't matter to you anymore. That's not fair. Isn't it? You humiliated me at my birthday dinner. You planned to take my home without asking. You let Sienna treat me like I was nothing. He stared at his hands. I didn't see it that way. I know, I said softly. That's the problem. We sat in uncomfortable silence until Caleb spoke again. Sienna left me, he said quietly. 2 weeks ago. She said this whole situation was my fault, that I should have controlled you better. She said I was weak for letting my mother ruin our plans. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Sadness for my son's pain. Relief that her influence was gone. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Are you? He challenged. You got what you wanted. We lost everything. I didn't want you to lose everything, Caleb. I wanted you to see me. To respect me. To remember that I'm a person, not just a resource you could drain dry. He looked up, tears in his eyes. We're struggling. I'm barely making rent. Sienna took half of everything when she left. I'm alone and I don't know what to do. Part of me wanted to fix it, to offer money, to save him like I always had. But I stayed quiet. After a moment, he continued. She called you last week. Asked for money. Did you know? I nodded. She did. I said no. Why? Because saying yes would teach you nothing. Both of you need to learn what I learned years ago. That life is hard and nobody owes you anything, not even your parents. Caleb was crying now, really crying, the way he used to when he was small and scared. I didn't know, Mom. I didn't know how much you sacrificed. I stayed where I was, didn't move to comfort him. What didn't you know? Any of it, he whispered. I found some papers when I was packing up the apartment. Old hospital bills. Loan documents. Everything was in storage boxes Sienna never let me go through. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. You took out loans to pay for Dad's cancer treatment. You refinanced the house twice to cover my college. You worked yourself to exhaustion and I never even noticed. No, I said quietly. You didn't notice. Why didn't you tell me? Because parents don't ask children for gratitude. We just love you and hope you'll grow into decent people who love us back. But you can't demand decency, Caleb. You can only model it and hope it takes root. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. For everything. For Sienna's cruelty. For my blindness. For that dinner. For planning to take your house. I'm sorry. I know, I said. And I did. I could see his regret was real. But regret doesn't erase damage. It just acknowledges it. We talked for 3 hours that day. I made tea. We sat on the balcony watching rain fall into the ocean. Caleb told me about his father, memories he'd kept locked away. I told him about the early years of my marriage, things he'd never asked about. We were tentative, careful, like strangers learning each other's languages. Before he left, he stood at the door and asked the question I'd been waiting for. Can we fix this? Can we go back? I shook my head. We can't go back, Caleb. That version of us is gone. You broke something, and even if we glue it back together, the cracks will still show. His face fell. So that's it? We're done. I didn't say that, I corrected gently. I said we can't go back. But maybe we can go forward, if you're willing to meet me as an equal, not as someone who exists to serve you. How do I do that? He asked, genuine confusion in his voice. You learn to respect me. To call before you visit. To ask instead of demand. To treat me like I matter. I paused. Respect or distance, Caleb. Those are the only options. You choose. He nodded slowly. Can I call you? Next week? You can, I said. Whether I answer depends on how you call. He left, and I closed the door, leaning against it, exhausted but hopeful. Maybe. Just maybe. 6 months passed. Caleb called occasionally, always respectful now, always asking about my life before talking about his own. He got a new job closer to where I lived. Found a small apartment he could afford. Started therapy to work through what Sienna had done to his thinking, to his relationship with me. He visited once a month, never staying too long, never asking for anything. We'd walk on the beach or sit at my small kitchen table drinking coffee. The conversations were different now. Real. He asked questions about my childhood, my marriage, my dreams. Things he'd never bothered to know before. One Sunday afternoon, we sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. I'd been thinking, Caleb said carefully, about how much time I wasted. Don't, I said softly. Don't live in the past. Just do better now. He nodded. Are we okay? You and me? I considered the question honestly. We're getting there. Some days I'm still angry. Some days I miss who you used to be. But some days, like today, I see who you're becoming, and that's enough. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared into the ocean. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. The house was gone, but I'd found myself. My son had betrayed me, but maybe he was learning to be better. I'd spent 60 years putting others first, and now, finally, I was learning to put myself first without guilt. My name is Marianne Holt. I didn't lose a son. I lost the illusion of one. And now, whatever grows between us will be real, built on respect and boundaries and mutual care. Or it will be nothing at all. Either way, I'll be fine. Because I finally learned the most important lesson. I matter. Not because of what I can give, but simply because I exist. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.